Hey guys, I'm going to make another video here. I took the crankshaft out of this engine, and where you see the copper color there, that's wear. That would be the next layer that's underneath the initial layer of the bearing. So that first journal there, and this is the main now, the main bearing, is rough. The second ones are scored. This third one here doesn't look bad. The last one here looks a little bit worn, but not bad. Now that's the bearings that are in the block. Okay. So anyway, I have the rest of them here, and I just want to show you what this looks like. If you look at the back of the bearing, this is relatively not bad. There's a little bit of staining there, age. Now there's a fairly big stain on 2, 3, 4, and 5. Not too bad. Now if you look at these real close, now this is the number 1 crank bearing for the main. You can see it looks as if this is one of those bearings that are divided down the middle, but actually that's because the crankshaft itself gets oiled in the center, and this engine must have been run without changing the oil filter for a very long time, because that oil hole that comes into the main bearing literally wore away pretty good. The center line here, you can see the copper there. Now the outside of the bearing doesn't look really that worn, so I can't say how badly it is. I'm just saying, you know, look at that. So anyway, these are standard bearings. If you read the back, you know, you probably can't see it, but take my word for it, it's a standard bearing. It ain't even on that side, it's on this side. I don't know if you can see that or not. Anyway, that's the number 1. Now if you look at the number 2, that black stain, now I've seen bearings stain like that from oil. However, that looks like a burn mark, and if you turn it over, you can see just how hot this thing had been and how much wear there was there. So I would say that this thing was heated up at one point in its life, pretty much. And you can see there that the heat transferred through. Now if you look at the main bearing cap, there's actually a stain on that as well. You see it there? So there was some pretty good heat there. So either it was a lot of heat in a short period of time, or it was heating up every time it was run for a long period of time to a lower temperature. Now we look at this number 3 journal. Well, what does that tell us? Look at how that thing is really burned. And when you look in there, man, there's some real wear in there. We're way down into the copper, it seems. And I mean, if running my finger over that, I can feel, you know, the bump where the groove was from the oil coming through. So this tells us then that, you know, when you get this wear and a lot of heat in there, that it will transfer through to the back of the bearing. Now it's hard to tell whether anything was actually melting, because this is fairly smooth and it doesn't look like any melting took place. However, it could have and then just washed away, but there's a lot of wear there. So then we look at the number 4 main bearing cap on this 5.7 Chevy engine, and there's 200 and what did he show me? I think he showed me 211,000 miles on this truck. So that's pretty much wear, and there's a hot spot there. So obviously these bearings are going to have to be replaced. Now the problem here, and then I'll show you the last one here first. This is the last one, then to show the end plate. There's a little bit of wear there, some on this side. And in the middle, again, you can really feel that groove that's cut through the middle. And the ironic thing is that this bearing is not made to have a groove through the middle of it, like some bearings are. Or no, wait a minute, the cap, this top one isn't, but the bottom one is. Actually, this would be the top in the engine, and this one would be the bottom. And it doesn't show the groove on the edge here like this does, so I would say that this did not have a groove in it, to start off with. But you can see from this small oil hole that's in there, it was what I would call, you have sandblasting, which takes off material. I would call this a type of hydroblasting, being where the metal is being worn away by the blast from the oil under pressure coming through the oil system, and it's got grit in it and dirt, a lot of dirt. If we look at the bearing cap here, it's not bad, it's not stained or anything really bad. Let's look at this number 5 here. Yeah, the bearing caps all look pretty good themselves. So they have, these last 3 have a little bit of a stain on them. Not a lot. Now, it could have affected it, and maybe it didn't affect it. Now, I had told you what I'm after here is sort of like, I'm doing what most people don't do a lot of, but I'm doing forensic engine rebuilding at this point. I'm trying to see what happened and why. And from what I can see there, with the way these bearings are, this is number 1. The weird thing here is number 1 there doesn't look bad, but the number 1 bearing in here is worn pretty good. This is number 1 in the block. Now this one's made to have that oil galley in it. This little groove to help the oil run through. And I'm sure that it was doing its job. However, like I say, I think what happens with this, if you can think about this, think about this for a second. Here you have the main bearing, the first main bearing. This is the first main bearing cap. Now, there's no groove in this bearing, you can see from up here. But this one does have a groove in it, and you can see where it comes through there. I would imagine that, imagine yourself getting like a ball of oil that would fill this groove, and then trying to force it at high speed through this. It's almost as if you're compressing the oil. Now, it's probably a good thing, and I'm sure the engineers know what they were doing, and that's why the oil would blow from side to side. But in this case, it's like wearing this away here. And this might be normal over a long, lot of miles. And that's why I'm looking at the motor, because I believe I can still use this block with a actual standard spec crankshaft and bearings that you can buy for probably $200. At least it's on sale anyway at Napa. I believe they're $206 right now. So what I want to do here now is I dried these off. These are dry underneath and on top. I know some people show you on the internet doing the plastic gauge after they've taken the bearing, they've oiled it all up, put it back in place. I don't agree with that. I think that the oil takes up space, obviously, and that if you put the oil under the bearing, on top of the bearing, and everywhere else, I believe that when you put the plastic gauge on there, the plastic gauge gives you a false reading. So what I'm doing right now is I'm cleaning these up. Now I got the crankshaft here. If I could get Bullseye to wag his tail, he could clean that for me. Hey, what about doing some work? Anyway, I need to clean the crank and the cam. I haven't measured any of that. Although I measured the journals on the connecting rods, and believe it or not, they're at their service limit. It's not too hard to believe. So But what I want to do is I want to clean up the connecting rod real good, put it back in and tighten the first and second bearing, and then I'll check the run out on the third bearing with a dial indicator. I'll show you how I do that then, just to see what is going on. I'm not keeping any of this. This crankshaft, in my opinion, is junk. I mean, it might be able to be ground, but I don't think that I can buy a new crankshaft and all the bearings for $200. I don't know of a machinist out there that can do the job for less than that, or even at that, and still give me the specs that I'm looking for. So anyway, I have to measure the journals, or I mean the lobes and stuff, and I'll measure the journals on the cam and all. And I did start putting stuff into an Excel spreadsheet, and I've got a lot of good information showing me what's going on with the rod bearings. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this crank yet, set it back in, and then I'll plastigate some of those bearings, and I'll let you know what happened with that. All of the other bearings have been done as far as checking, and any information I needed has been finished. And it's in my spreadsheet, so I'll give you a little brief idea of what that says then too. Alright guys, so just to give you an idea of what is going on here, I believe that over time, again real quick, we had some heat issues at one point that went along with wear, or with the amount of mileage on the motor. Maybe it was wear and just natural heat occurring after that. I mean, it's not real hot. It wasn't real hot, you know, hot enough to melt anything. Although it doesn't matter, because if you think about you know, metal, a little bit of heat in one place can change major components at another. Welders know this. You know, you put two pieces of metal together that are 4 foot long and weld at one end, and you look at the other end and it's 1.5 inches apart. So heat can do funny things. That's why we measure everything. Alright guys, thanks a lot. Have a good one. Bye.